welcome to the latest edition of the Kolpak and Izzo podcast as we are heading for the first time, at least for me, first time to the state of Kentucky, the Commonwealth of Kentucky. North Dakota State will take on the Murray State Racers Saturday afternoon. Bison football back on WDAY. We're pumped about that for this Saturday's game for the newest member of the Missouri Valley Football Conference. You're an old vet of Kentucky. You've been down there at least, I know, once.
Twice to the Derby. But this will be the second time to Kentucky, the state of Kentucky, for a member of my family to cover a football game.
Yeah.
1976. My dad was there when in the quarterfinals of the NCAA Division II tournament, Division II playoffs. It was NDSU's first game in the NCAA model of playoffs.
Okay.
Because before it was in the college division, is what they called it. And so 1976, I looked it up this morning on microfilm.
Yeah.
And
they played Eastern Kentucky.
Eastern
correct?
Kentucky, the Bison won 10-7. They won despite completing 1 of 7 passes for 10 yards, and they lost 5 fumbles and still won the game.
What is it with the Bison winning games, completing 1 pass? They just did that 2 years ago. No, 2 years ago they just did it. Remember Cam Miller completed 1 pass.
And then it was Jose Moeller was like 3 of 10 or something against Montana State.
He was like Warren Moon compared to what those 2 games.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. That's pretty neat. That's a cool connection for your family.
Yeah,
then.
so I read my dad's story. It wasn't that good, but there was no quotes in it. I'm like, the quotes came the next day in a fall story.
Maybe it was a late game. Was it a late game?
I don't know.
Early press? I mean, you were dealing with that just the other night.
I got quotes in my story.
Let's first start on Murray before we get to the Bison stuff, because we've hammered on this for the better part of 2.5 years since they've been into the league. But this is going to be our first trip. And then Murray's off the schedule for the next 2 years. They do not play the Bison in 25 and 26. So I'm intrigued to see what we're going to get. They promised when you spoke with them, I did as well. Hey, we're in it. We're going to invest in football. We know what kind of league we're in. I'm really interested to see what they have down there that they have to work with, Jeff.
They did open up their new renovated locker room in June, so they finished that project, and I think that's a good sign. Now, I don't know what else is on tab. I forgot now what they want to do, but I feel like that stadium needs to be addressed.
That stadium's 50 years old. Is when Roy Stewart Stadium opened, was 1973. So there's only so much you could probably do. It looks so similar to Terre Haute that, and for people that have gone to...
It stands on one side.
Right, that people have gone there, and that stadium is even older than what Murray State has to deal with.
So if it's 50 years old, I mean, it looks pretty good in a photo, but that could be deceiving. Correct. I'm curious to see if the concrete is crumbling. Like, I remember the first foray into Southern Illinois in Carbondale, it was the stadium was...
McAndrew Stadium.
Yep. And the concrete was crumbling and looked awful. It looked almost like SDSU's Coughlin alumni is almost the same setup. Yep. But they built a new stadium, beautiful Saluki Stadium is very nice. And it's one of the nicer ones in FCS. Although they don't fill it really very much. But so I'm curious to see how Murray's setup is. Curious to see the overall vibe of the community.
Yeah. Yep.
I'm looking forward to this. I like going to new places.
Yes.
I do.
This is the 5th time they've ever hosted the number 1 team in the country. The last time was Jacksonville State when they were number 1 back in 2016. If you remember right, the Gamecocks actually got to number 1 after the Bison lost to the Jacks in the Dakota Marker game. Jacksonville State for a brief time was number 1 in the country that year. Jody Wright is a football guy. He's coached everywhere. He knows everybody. He knows Nick Saban, knows Kirby Smart. That's the guy they hired to replace Dean Hood, who did the first year of the transition. They said thank you, and now we want a football. This guy, he has connections, Jeff. Whether he can get football players to Murray, that's another question.
He was an assistant at Alabama, Mississippi State, and South Carolina of the SEC. He's been in the NFL with the Giants and Cleveland. He was with Cleveland, too, as an assistant in some capacity. You would think he'd have some good connections. He'll need some good connections. They need defensive players. Brought in, they have 53 transfer players on the roster right now. He may have to hit the portal again pretty hard.
You told me, though, on this.
I
think we've seen it, though. Finding defensive guys in the portal is really hard. That's not – offensive guys is one thing to kind of plug and play. Finding defensive guys, I think, over the 4-year window we've had of this, it's not been an easy fix.
I think finding guys in general is tough because of the reason the portal. They probably didn't play. They probably weren't good enough to play at their previous spot. And, recruiting's not exact science. Guys don't all develop.
Pan out.
Yep. And some guys just aren't good enough or just don't. They get to college and don't project to what they were originally hoping for. And are those the guys you want on your team?
Right. The league needs this to work out. It's not a great addition. It just isn't.
Not right now.
We said it at the time. They are 1-6 on the year. They're 0-4 in the league. They gave up 72 in Grand Forks. They gave up 40 last week to Illinois State. I want to say it's got to work, but because every league has bad teams, I get that. But this just doesn't reflect well on a league that we always consider, and I think is the top in the FCS. This is just I said at the time, it's a head-scratching move. There's a reason why the former president of North Dakota State voted no. Dean Brashani said no about
Give him
admitting
props.
them. I'd like to see it work, but it's going to be a slog, Jeff. I don't know how this is going to pan out.
The Racers are giving up 40.0 points a game, which is 1/16th out of 123 in the FCS in scoring defense.
That's not.
And they still have the tougher part of their schedule left.
They still have to go to Brookings too, as well. They play another.
They have Kentucky.
SEC. They play Kentucky coming up as well. So, and
Missouri State
and most states on there. They had 16,000 come out to their game last week against Illinois State. It seats 18. I'm just dying to know how many people are going to come to this game. Because we saw it when we went to Johnson City and ETSU. They
ready.
Wanted to come and they wanted to see the number one team and get up. I don't know if that's the same vibe we're going to have on Saturday in Murray.
Boy, that's a $1 million question right now in my mind.
Yeah.
Do the fans care enough about football to see what the number one team in the country looks like?
Because we are on the doorstep of basketball season, and for people that don't know,
it's a basketball school.
Murray State is the school that produced Ja Morant, one of the best players in the NBA. They are a dynamite basketball program. That's the reason they left the Ohio Valley to get into the Missouri Valley Conference to up their basketball profile to go in that league.
Therefore, the football team needed a home, and therefore there was a move to admit the football team into the Missouri Valley Football Conference, which is a different entity than the Missouri Valley Conference.
I'm really interested to see where they go here. What kind of are they going to put resources into football? Because you're seeing the programs that haven't. It is evident now. Indiana State doesn't have any money to spend. We see what their results are out on the field right
Northern
now.
Iowa is not.
Northern Iowa
funding is questionable.
And you can see the results there. Between the portal and not being able to fund your football program, it's going to be that. The teams that are, South Dakota has decided to invest in football. They have that new outdoor, it's not new anymore, that outdoor practice facility. Certainly South Dakota State. UND built their indoor facility. They've invested in football. They have cost of attendance. They have NIL. It just bears out. If you're going to spend the money, you can be good in football.
Montana State building a new indoor football facility. They have a collective. They're investing in football, and the results are they're unbeaten, and they'll probably run the table unbeaten this year.
Yep. All right, let's chat about the Bison here. This is a beat-up group again. The win over the Jacks came at a cost with two more guys being done for the season. Sam Jung is out for the rest of the year, and his career is over with a torn pectoral. Let's start with that. Implications of how big a deal that is in your mind that Sam Jung has done.
Not tremendously big. It is in the veteran presence standpoint and the communication standpoint, as what Tim Paul said to us. I think Jalen Crumby is equally as athletic, if not more athletic. I think he'll turn out to be a pretty good player. Problem is he's a redshirt freshman, so I don't know how that's going to play into this change. But by and large, Dom, as a blanket statement, I'm not really concerned that the losses can't be overcome by players, because I think the players taking their spots, talking about DN, talking about safety, talking about backup quarterback, I don't think it's impactful like it sounds.
Crumby's 5'11", 194. He's a big guy back there, and he's been, I think, steadily getting better. You've seen him out there breaking up passes, making plays. He made a play in the game Saturday against South Dakota State. Another one from Tampa, Jeff. We know the kind of football players that are down from that area. It's tough for Sam Jung. Sam Jung had worked his way into the rotation.
They just feel bad for the guy.
I feel gutted for him on the fact that this is how his career is going to end. The Peyton news is tough to take for a couple reasons. A, because Cole's just an amazing athlete, and when he gets in there, he's a game breaker with his ability to make plays. But you had the stat, and you brought it up on the Bison Media Zone this week. He's just not been used as frequently as he was last year. Because Cam you're not taking him off the field.
No.
And Polisic is, and I don't blame him for being angry about it. Like, we're not taking him off the field to get Cole Payton into the game.
Yeah, because I thought we'd see him more at tight end this year. Because there's references to Taysom Hill. I thought we'd see him more at slot receiver.
Just didn't happen. Who are you going to take off the field at wide receiver, though?
I would like to see him return kickoffs, honestly. But
get ahead of steam. He can move.
Yeah. But obviously they just never got to those packages. Maybe there were plans later in the season to do so, but we hadn't seen it yet. And not sure if I don't think it's going to be noticeable unless Cam gets hurt.
Right.
And then you have to go to an untested guy named Nathan Hayes.
I'll get to Hayes in a second, but Polisic says, we're not worried about the future until you are. And we're going to start tailoring our offense to Cole Payton come February 1. We'll have plenty of time to dissect this in the offseason, but that remains a large question mark to me about what the offense is going to look like with a guy that just hasn't got a lot of snaps. Sorry, I'll let you finish this point, but look at in the last 15 years of the Bison quarterbacks, right? When Brock Jensen took over, we had no idea, right? Jose Mulder was the guy, wasn't getting it done. Bull puts Jensen in, obviously it works. When Carson got in, we had a limited sample size, but you knew the athleticism was there, that you figured it was going to be something. Obviously, we got to look at Easton Stick when Carson got hurt, and you felt Bison are in pretty good hands there. And the brief glimpses we had of Trey Lance, you knew, okay, the Bison might be certainly in a pretty good spot. Then, obviously, it's funny, ironic, because we thought Zeb Nolan was going to be the guy, and that didn't pan out, that we were left in that murky kind of transition of 21 when Quincy Patterson beat out Cam Miller for the job. Are we in that same position, we as reporters in 2025, what the Bison have with their quarterback situation next year?
Well, they're Cole Payton's the guy,
right,
because Tim said we got to start building our offense around him starting February 1st.
Yes.
But he's going to be a one-year guy. I mean, he's going to be a one-year guy. And let's not forget about Cole Payton. There's a leadership aspect to it too with him.
Cam Miller said he's the best leader on the team. He said he'd vote for him captain. He would vote for Payton. He told me that on media day.
He's been a leader in the Green and Gold Collective as a student athlete. He's been obviously a leader with the players. So he will be a senior captain next year.
Yes.
But that being said, now it's you look at Nathan Hayes, best arm on the team.
Yes.
Randy Hedberg told me that. Yep. He has the best arm on the team. He's pretty fast. We saw that. Yeah. He's big. He's 6'3", 205. He's big enough, certainly.
I want to see him actually try and rip it. I don't know if this game is going to lend itself to do that if it's 42-7, Jeff. Polisic's not going to have him throwing 15-yard outs in the third and the fourth quarter of this game. It's just not going to materialize, but I'd like to see what they have in this kid.
I don't think there's anything wrong if you're up big throwing a 15-yard out with a guy who hasn't thrown one.
Everybody gets upset these days about everything, so there probably is.
It's an out pattern. You're not throwing. You don't have to throw the post deep, but you could throw a 15-yard out pattern.
I guess you could. But I'd like to see, you know what I mean, in that realm, to see him rip it here, see what the kid's got.
How many varsity passes does he have? Zero. Has he thrown any?
I thought he threw. Did he throw one against Tennessee State? Hold on. No. Yeah, he has no. It does not. All he has is that touchdown run that he had against Tennessee State.
If somebody gets bitter with 8 minutes left in the game and you're throwing a 15-yard out, come on.
Everybody gets upset about everything these days. To that point now, on the injury side, I've had this asked of me, so I'll throw this at you. Is there potential that Cole Wisniewski could play this season?
It hasn't been totally ruled out. And we were told at the start, don't talk to me about it for 8, 9, 10 weeks, right? And that was the head coach.
So this week is 9.
This is 9. May have to, if things play out the way I think, may have to, after the game, kind of go, hey.
Yep. Where are we at?
Where are we at?
So I can tell you, I talked to Cole before the game in Carbondale. He's off the crutches. He's out of the boot. Surgery went.
Word is rehab's gone very well. Yep. That's word.
As we sit here on October, we're recording this on October 23rd. November 23rd is the last day of the regular season. Do we see him playing in Vermilion? Maybe that's probably a stretch, but maybe by the time the playoffs come around, that first week of December, December 7th? Do we see number
Again,
31 back out there?
You can't rule it out with the vibe I'm getting on how everything. Apparently, the surgery went well. He's running well in the pool, is what I've been told.
Yep.
I don't think you can rule it out.
I think this is remember we did this 2 years ago with Wisniewski. We kept asking Matt Entz, when do we think he's going to be back? When is he going to be back? Same thing with Eli Mostart. We did that year too.
Remember Brock Johannssen miraculously healed by drinking milk?
Milk! And the collarbone was healed. He was back by the end of the regular season.
Is Cole drinking milk?
If you think you add him back, holy cow! You talk about an addition, man. That'd be something.
Would he
else.
be in game shape? I suppose. I mean, enough.
That's the thing you're probably worried about now to December. You know, I think the Bison are 7-1. If they finish 11-1, they know they're going to be a top 2 seed. They're not traveling for the playoffs. You're going to get the bye. They've got 2 byes now worked in because the bye's coming late, November the 9th, and then the other one would be whatever it is, November 30th, the first week of the FCS playoffs before you go. You've got
assuming you don't
time.
stumble,
right? There's some. That is fascinating to see if that comes to fruition between now and the end of the regular season. Just something to gnaw on here. By the way, as we're recording this, Craig Haley has released the Jerry Rice watch list for 30 freshman standouts. The Bison have one on there, and Marty Brown is, I think, 4 yards short of being the top freshman rusher in all of FCS. He'll be in the mix, depending on what his final numbers are. I think he's definitely in the mix to finish in the top 3 of this award.
Yeah, they don't have very many guys on this list ever because they don't play a lot of freshmen.
Trey Lance was the only one that ever won it, and obviously with the kind of season he had.
But if Marty Brown, and I'm waiting for him to start breaking a couple, he's going to come close. I think he has a chance
this weekend.
I think he has a chance to win that.
Yeah,
I do.
I think he'll be in consideration.
He should be.
Yeah, the kind of year he's had and how often he's getting the football, and maybe this weekend is a chance to go what you're talking about of breaking one. That can be the case. I wanted to give some time about the Bison defense, Jeff, because we had admonished them probably for the first few weeks of the season and how they had played, certainly against Colorado, against East Tennessee State, the second half against Towson. Since Valley play has begun, it has been night and day for Grant Olson's team. Yeah,
and I said on the Bison Media Zone this week that I think it's time to give props to defensive coordinator Grant Olson because, and you got to realize this is his first time as a coordinator. So maybe there were some growing pains there and some things he had to work through in calling games against East Tennessee State and Towson where the rushing defense was not very good. But they gotten better, and that's coaching. And teams that improve and get better, it just doesn't happen magically. I mean, there's work in practice, there's work in meeting rooms, there's working on gap control, this and that. Players have been adjusted in different positions. They switched Young. Now, unfortunately, now he's out to strong safety. Put Givens at free, which he seems to be a little more at home.
Yep.
So they made that. I think they went to a movement of not rotating so much in the middle. We'll see what happens this weekend with Kubitz back.
So Kubitz will be back, and the game that Wirtz had, and we know Benson isn't going to play, and they were already flirting with the idea of moving Kubitz out wide. Do we see that fully in fruition this week with him and Sibamana? Because Enoch is scheduled to start, and boy, he's had a great run here.
He's gotten a lot better, and he is the fastest linebacker, we think.
Yep.
And Luke's coming off a career day, in my opinion. That was his best career game at South Dakota State.
Wirtz had his best game against the Bison. There's no doubt about that in my mind. I agree. And frankly, so did Benson. I thought Benson had his best game as a Bison, too, last week, and that makes the injury he suffered. Now, from what Polisic says, they expect him back at some time after with this shoulder
injury. Don't forget, Jalen Duffy, we believe, is coming back at corner, so you're getting him healthy.
Yep. So you got a couple guys back there, but I want to make this point because Polisic asked about the linebacker depth. He says, and he gave props to Matt Entz about the recruiting in the linebacker room specifically was done very well. That what they have in linebacker depth is a product of the recruiting. And there's another guy we haven't even mentioned, in Austin Altapeter, who's going to play, I think, quite a bit this weekend.
And that depth, I think, played a role in Peter Haugo remaining at running back now.
Yeah, because you asked about that. Let me get to that in a second, because with Staling out, Altapeter's obviously going to play more. That you've got Sibamana. Those are all guys that were recruited 3 or 4 years ago that we kept asking, when are we going to see him play? Well, here they are, and they can play for the most part, it looks like to me.
Altapeter can hit.
Yeah.
And he can flat out hit. And you can tell, it sounds different the way he hits people. But with Peter, they moved him to running back because the depth wasn't to their satisfaction there. You have 3 guys that have played primarily. I think Peter is the 4th. So when he was signed last December, he was 6'2", 200. He reported in August at 6'2", 213. He's up to 217 now.
Wow. Okay. That's big. That is a big man.
So, and do you envision him in a different, like a Derek Lang type of role?
Maybe, yeah. So you asked Polisic afterwards about future of Haugo, because that was something you and I talked about on this podcast, early in the year when Peter was getting reps at running back, and Tim said he's gonna stay at running back then. He
said in August, he goes, well, later in the year we'll make a determination whether we move him back to linebacker or keep him at running back. And so, okay, I thought it's later in the year. I'm going to ask him. And he said, well, no, they like him at running back.
At least for now, right?
Yep.
For the rest of this season. Whether that means he's a running back or a linebacker next year is a question, because that's an area that Polisic has made a high priority in recruiting to get better at that spot.
And if things go according to plan on Saturday, we may see him with a few carries.
Haugo you're talking about. Yeah. I think at this point, you're starting to gauge. You've got 4 games left in the regular season. Haugo, I think, has played in 2 games so far this year, maybe 3. And I know he doesn't care about red shirts, but you're going to try and determine, if you play one more game, then you can't play another until the postseason.
Well, it's an interesting dynamic on red shirts, and my game day feature this week is on Raja Nelson and all the decision-making that's going into that, because he got hurt in the season opener with an internal injury against Colorado. And so that put him out, but he returned against
UND.
Yep.
He got one catch in that game.
So that's game 2.
Yep.
And with the nature of his injury, apparently when he plays, he doesn't recover very well with the
because Polisic said there's
hernia-like injury.
There's no way he'd be able to play this week, he said to us.
And so then you take that into account. And then you take the fact he played as a true freshman. And you take the 4-game rule into account. It's an interesting dynamic because usually that 4-game rule is meant for true freshmen, not guys who played as a true freshman and then have this injury thing to deal with.
You remember the last who did was probably Dimitri Williams. Remember that? He did that, and he came back.
The rule started in 2018.
Yeah, and Dimitri came back for 2019 because they utilized him for 4 games in 18, and he came back and played, and he was a weapon on that 2019 team. That'll be his 6th year of football for Raja, so I'm curious to see.
I think it's 5th year, isn't it?
He came in 20, so he played in 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25 would be if he decides to utilize that next season. But he's a weapon, man.
It's the nature of this injury. If he was recovering after, he wasn't hurt every game, he'd play the rest of the year. But the fact that he has such issues with, again, being healthy the following week after playing, which I would imagine would probably get better as the season goes along. He gave props to Tricia Shannon.
Trish Shannon after the game. He gave her all the props after that.
And he goes, she comes in at 5 a.m. She's there 7 days a week. She treats us 120 players as kids that she doesn't have that aren't hers.
She came over from the soccer team. She was training there, and now is full time with football. And Polisic has lauded her since the season got going. About
a little different taking care of 18 soccer players compared to 120 football players.
There's no doubt about that. And you saw the impact that Nelson had. I mean, if you're going to pick and choose the games you're going to be available for,
So he's got one more, the 4 games.
And I think you can all probably put 2 and 2 together.
You might as well wait till the end of the year with South Dakota. And you'd like to have him against Missouri State because Missouri State's pretty good.
Yep.
But considering the health and give him another week to rest, you'd put him in South Dakota.
And Polisic threw out this caveat as well. It says also depends on our wide receiver depth. That rule might go up.
Which has been good, though. Which has been really good.
They've been really good there. But if it comes to a spot where, hey, we need you, then they're going to go back and have a conversation.
Chris Harris has really developed into a really good player.
That catch he had on the throw, and Cam did all the work on the throw there, but that catch
you still got to make the play.
That set up the Nelson touchdown.
Makai Collins has been solid. Bryce has been really good.
Yep. All those guys that, again, there's the other position. We talked about linebacker. Wide receiver is one we hammered for the last, I'd say, 18 months. Who's gonna finally emerge in that room? They've had 4 guys emerge in my mind this year.
Bryce is on pace to have a much better year than Eli Green did last year, and we didn't see that coming.
I would have lost money on that. If you'd have told me in August that Bryce Lance would have more catches and touchdowns than Eli had in 2023, no way. I would have taken that bet.
Eli had 45. Bryce has 37 already, 38.
Yep. And the way he's trending, if you get 5 more a game, we're talking he's going to finish near 60 receptions. That's at North Dakota State. Have that in one season? No way.
Well, then they're going to have to pay him after the season.
And you know what?
But they're working on it. I've heard the green and gold.
Yep.
I've heard some pretty interesting things of people investing in it.
And that, you know what? You need to do that this day and age. That's the way it goes. One last thing, because I don't think we've talked about them enough before we go. Bison offensive line, because Polisic will always look at me, how's the offensive line? Because that's something we talked about ad nauseum for 7 months. Jeff, they've been great. They've been really good.
Oh, I don't know if they were great last week. There wasn't a lot of holes.
Here's the thing. Yeah, but Cam got sacked once in that game. You know, they were
great there.
I would tell you, I think they've been really good all season long. I do. South Dakota State still got a great defense. The fact that they couldn't create holes against them, nobody can do that.
I should suck up to bigger players more often.
I'm just saying, their offensive line, for the amount of questions they had coming in, Empey's been really good. Fraley, I think, has been really good at center. And Rock, starting for the first time, has been really good at guard. I thought that they've been, for the amount of questions they've had, they've been really good at that spot.
And so losing Zabel after this year, they'll be able to handle it.
I think
Johannsen.
I think we might have saw one of the replacements yesterday, and Johannsen walking around. Jack Lewinsky is waiting in the wings, who's played a little bit this year. That's just talk about the depth they have. That's the spot where they've really handled that.
Really, I mean,
pretty well.
Before we leave, one question: if you could go into the portal for the Bison for next year, would you? What player would you look for? If you could take one player,
like a position, you mean?
Yep. A quarterback?
I was going to say quarterback. I really would. I think it comes back.
You don't know what you have in Trey Drake.
Initially came to quarterback. Yep. You know, if you have next year, it's Peyton, Hayes, Trey Drake, who's on the roster. They have Xander Smith coming in from Florida as their incoming recruit for the class of 2025. I would look at and
how about running back?
When you said that, the two positions came to me were quarterback and running back.
They may take one,
and they may both.
Yeah,
maybe something to look at heading into the off season. Your quest between now and Saturday morning is to somehow get Racer 1 somehow around. Oh, quiet on that.
Yeah.
But for people that don't know, they actually have a racehorse that goes on the track. Correct?
Yeah, Racer 1 started in 1976. Was that, I think, or 74 or something like that?
So this is a football stadium. When's the last time we had a football stadium with a track around it that the Bison have been at? You have to search the archives on that
Houston?
one. Yeah, probably. Most State used to before they renovated down there. Oh, gosh. Yeah, I'm trying to think anywhere else that comes to mind on that, but that's what we got with Murray State coming up this weekend. And yes, we will have the football game on WDAY. And by the way, for you out-of-state listeners, the game will be streamed on ESPN Plus with our broadcast this week. So you get Dom Izzo whether you like it or not out there, everybody. Myself, Kyle Emanuel, Sam Getzinger, we'll have the call on ESPN Plus for the game on Saturday. We've been out of it for 2 weeks, Kolpak, so it's good to be back.
Yeah, it's riding a bike, Dom. You guys are professionals.
I hope so. It'll be good. We'll have Bison Game Day live at 10 a.m. as well Saturday morning from Murray, Kentucky. We might have to play some more geography with Getzinger, by the way. I don't know. Kentucky.
Do I need a visual?
You might.
I might need another visual.
Kentucky is, it's like Egypt to him on a map. That might be fun to do that coming up on Saturday.
Who is this geography teacher?
That's not, somebody in New Prague is getting lit up on that one. For Jeff Kolpak, I'm Dom Izzo. Thanks for listening, everybody. The Kolpak and Izzo podcast. We'll see you at the game on Saturday.